Episode 1. The Voice Behind the Curtain. The confession began like any other, except the voice on the other side of the curtain wasn't like any voice I had ever heard. It didn't shake, it didn't whisper, it declared, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned, and heaven will burn for it." I didn't answer immediately. There was something in the way she said heaven, as if she wasn't afraid of it, as if she had touched it once and scarred it. I cleared my throat and offered the ritual line. "How long has it been since your last confession?" She laughed. "Quiet. Hello. I was never allowed to confess. Not after what I did to the angel." My blood ran cold. I'm sorry." She didn't repeat herself. Instead, she began to tell a story in it chronologically, not clearly viewed in fragments, like ash drifting through stained glass. I kissed a being that didn't bleed until I made him bleed. I carried a light inside me that heaven itself tried to extinguish. They sent fire, not punishment, but warning. I leaned closer. The wood of the confessional creaked beneath my fingers. "Who are you?" I asked. There was silence. Long, deliberate silence. Then she answered, "I am the sin heaven will never forgive, and I need you, Father Elian, to forgive me first." She said my name. I hadn't told her my name. I stood apart, pounding. I yanked the curtain aside. No one was there. The confessional was empty, except for the scent-like myrrh mixed with something burnt. I stepped outside. The church was quiet, lit only by candles flickering along the walls. I turned back toward the altar and gasped. Every candle, every single had gone out, and then, as if inhaling all the breath in the room, they exploded back to life. Not golden, red. Flames danced on their own, curling upwards as if reaching for something invisible above. And on the marble floor, right beneath the crucifix, a symbol began to appear drawn in soot and wax. A gate, circular, ancient, with wings carved around it, and fire licking its edges. The doors of heaven had just been marked, and I had just become their witness. Episode 2. The Burned Altar. By dawn, the church no longer smelled of incense. It smelled of ash. I stood before the altar, my hands trembling it from the cold of morning. But from what I saw, the white cloth draped over the sacred table had been reduced to blackened threads. The polished wood beneath, burnt in a perfect circle, the same shape as the gate I saw the night before. But this was no dream. This was real, and the mark, it was still warm. I touched it. Pain shot through my finger, a burn, a reminder, a warning. Father Elian, a voice behind me. It was Father Moros, the elder priest, his face pale, his eyes white with fear. "What happened here?" he asked. Though I saw in his gaze he already feared the answer. "You don't know." I lied, because what could I say? That a woman's confession summoned a fire heaven itself could not contain. That the gates of eternity had left their mark at our feet. Moros crossed himself, his fingers shaking. "Never speak of this to the congregation. We'll say it was a candle that fell. Nothing more." But as he spoke, I noticed something. Above the altar, carved into the ancient stone, was the figure of a gate I'd never seen before. It had always been there, or had it only now revealed itself? And as my eyes traced its outline, my ears filled with a sound, a soft weeping, but no one else seemed to hear it. That night, I stayed in the church long after the doors were locked. I sat in the front pew, staring at the altar, staring at the mark. The candles burned low, their light casting strange shadows across the walls. And then it came again, the voice, but not from the confessional this time. From above. "Elian," it said, soft as breath, but sharp as a blade. "Look up." I did, and there, high above, where the ceiling met the heavens, I saw a faint outline in the stone, as if something beyond the church, beyond our world, had left its fingerprint. A gate of fire, invisible to all but me, and through it, for a fleeting second, I saw something that stole the air from my lungs. And jarred, broken, pushing the gate closed. Too late. The flames had already broken through, and I knew then the confession was not finished. The true sin had not yet been spoken, and when it was, heaven's gate would burn for all to see. Episode 3. The Woman Without a Name. She vanished like smoke. No footprints, no name in the parish log. No face caught by any of the cameras near the chapel doors. I replayed the footage 100 times. The timestamp showed the confessional curtain shifting, but no one ever entered. I should have called it madness, sleep deprivation, a hallucination born from too many nights beneath stained glass and whispered prayers. But then I saw the painting. It hung in the forgotten hallway of the crypt beneath the church, buried beneath dust, untouched for decades. An old oil canvas, cracked with time, colors faded to dusk. A woman, eyes closed, hands raised in prayer, but not to Christ, not to any saint. Her hands were lifted upward, towards something beyond the frame, something that glowed. And the face, God help me, it was her, the woman from the confessional. Except this painting was dated 1731. I traced the inscription at the bottom. Maria in nomine ignito. Mary, in the name unknown. Unknown. Even the church had refused to write it. My breath caught. I stood there in the silence of the crypt, that air still and cold, and then I felt it again. That presence, the same scent, myrrh and burnt honey, not of this earth, not holy, not demonic, something else. I turned around slowly, and there she was, standing just beyond the archway, face obscured in shadow, veil covering her hair, hands clasped at her chest. You've seen it, she said. Her voice was the semi-velvet, ancient, final. The gate has begun to remember, and so have I. I stumbled backward, whispering, "What are you?" She stepped forward, the candlelight catching her eyes, gold, like molten suns. "I am not a demon," she said, "and not quite a woman, but I once was both." She placed her hand on the wall behind the painting. Stone crumbled like ash, revealing an inscription I had never seen before. The confession that awakens flame shall echo until the gates collapse. Before I could speak, she turned and vanished. This time, no sound, not even air disturbed. I pressed my hand to the stone. It was hot, still burning from inside, and I knew this wasn't just a haunting. This was a return, a resurrection of something the church had buried, but never truly silenced. Episode 4. The Forbidden Gospel. There are books the church puts on display, and there are books it hides beneath stone. I found the latter beneath the altar, sealed inside a rusted iron box that hadn't seen daylight in centuries, until I pried it open, barehanded, as if something inside was calling me by name. It wasn't a Bible, not even close. Its cover was skin leathery, darkened with time, stitched along the spine with what I swear was golden thread and hair. No title, just one word, burned into the front in a language I'd only seen once in ancient apocrypha. Veritas, truth. I didn't open it in the church. I was afraid of what might happen to the air, the candles, to me. So I took it to my room, locked the door, lit a single candle, and I opened the Forbidden Gospel. The first page wasn't written. It bled, ink soaked through as if the words were still alive, still writing themselves. And the language, it twisted inside my head, reshaping itself until I understood it without reading. In the beginning was the silence, and silence was with the Maker, and the Maker broke it for love. And thus, sin was born not of man, but of God. I dropped the book. My fingers tingled. My ears rang. This wasn't scripture. It was a confession, but not from us. From him. I turned to the middle pages, desperate, breathless, and reached into the parchment in what looked like fire-hardened ash. Was a drawing? A gate. The same one scorched onto our altar. The same one the woman spoke of. The same gate from my dreams. Only this version was open, and from it, something was crawling through. Not demons, not angels, but fragments of light and shadow stitched into the shape of a woman. I traced that image with my finger, and the candle in my room snuffed out on its own. A voice whispered from the book. "Elian." I frowned. See, it hadn't been written there. It wasn't hallucination. It was her. Again. "Did you think truth would save you?" Her voice echoed through the room, like stained glass shattering in reverse. "No, Father. Truth burns, and you've just read the first spark." The book closed itself. The candle relit without flame, and written in ash across my mirror were 6 words I didn't remember writing. Some gospels were never meant to end. Episode 5. The Angel Scar. I stopped praying after that night, not because I stopped believing, but because I no longer knew who I was praying to. The Forbidden Gospel still Saturday beneath my bed, wrapped in cloth, bound in silence, but its presence infected everything. The air in the church grew heavier. The statues began to sweat, and at night, something began breathing beneath the altar. I tried to bury myself in routine, morning mass, communion, baptism, but nothing felt clean anymore. Then came the dream. It didn't begin like most dreams though, floating. No blur, no uncertainty. It opened with fire. I stood in a cathedral made of bone and sky. The walls pulsed, the pews were ash, and at the altar stood a creature with wings, but not the kind found in scripture. One wing was feathered, gold-tipped, radiant. The other was charred, twisted, dripping with tar and blood. He turned toward me, eyes like obsidian glass, and as he moved, I saw the scar across his chest, long, vertical, as if heaven itself had tried to rip him in half. "Do you know what it cost?" he asked. "To love what God refused." I couldn't answer. My mouth was sewn shut in the dream. The unbelief that's what he knelt before a flame that floated above the altar. Inside the flame was her, the woman, naked, motionless, sleeping inside divine fire. She was never Eve, the angel whispered. She was the confession he buried. Then he reached toward her with his burned wing, and the flame recoiled, screaming in 1,000 voices. The cathedral cracked. The bones howled. She bore the truth, he said, and I bore the punishment. Then he looked at me, not at my face, at my chest. To reach beneath my skin was the same mark I saw on his body, a scar, glowing faintly beneath the surface. I woke in a cold sweat, my sheets soaked, my heart pounding. I ripped off my shirt, and there it was, real, a thin, jagged burn along my sternum, like I'd been kissed by a lightning bolt while I slept. Only one thing could leave a mark like that, touched by something divine or damned. And I knew now what she meant when she said heaven would burn. It already had, and it left its wound inside me. Episode 6, The Blood Confession. The confessional was empty, but the seat where she had, Saturday, was still warm. It had been days since the voice, since the dream, since I found that impossible scar across my chest. But the trail hadn't gone cold. It had grown warmer, wetter. It was just after midnight when I returned to the chapel, unable to sleep, drawn like a moth to the dying flame of faith. The air was thick, heavy with smoke that didn't exist. The candles had all burned out, yet their scent lingered like wax melting on skin. I sat her inside the confessional, this time on her side, not to hear, but to understand. And that's when I saw it, a single drop of blood on the wooden kneeler, still wet, still warm. I frowned, then leaned in closer. Another drop, then another. They trailed along the floor out of the booth, across the nave, all the way to the altar. There, pooled beneath the marble cross, was a small crimson stain in the shape of a hand, feminine, delicate, pressed flat into the stone, as if someone had knelt there, bleeding, begging. I reached for it, and the moment my fingers touched the blood, visions. I wasn't in the church anymore. I was in a different place, a corridor of light and bone, echoing with whispers not meant for ears. A voice rang out like a bell inside my skull. The angels knew, but they stayed silent. I bled to make them see, and still, they chose him. I saw flashes, a temple, a body hanging upside down, wings severed, a Mano, and Angela on his knees, screaming her name into a fire that refused to speak it. And then, the gate. But this time, it was fully open, and through it came a storm of demons. Not of fire, but of confessions. Thousands, millions, all whispered by souls who had once prayed for salvation and were never answered. I gasped for breath and fell backward. The vision vanished, but the blood on the altar remained. I had it tested the next day, secretly, through a lab contact who owed me silence. The results came back within hours. Unknown match. DNA not human, not animal, not on record, not of this world. And then, a handwritten note scrawled at the bottom by the technician. Tell me this is a joke, because if this is real, it's not blood, it's a warning. Episode 7, The Candle That Never Dies. It was never on any map of the church, not in the blueprints, not in the records, not even Father Morros knew it existed. But the door was there written behind the faded tapestry of St. Bartholomew, a saint skinned alive for speaking a truth heaven found inconvenient. How poetic, how prophetic. The hinges groaned as I forced it open, revealing a narrow stairwell spiraling into darkness that smelled older than stone, older than time. The air was damp, laced with mildew, and something faintly sweet, like burnt roses. I lit a lantern. Halfway down, the flame flickered. Then, it stopped moving, completely still. No sway, no dance, like the air had frozen, or time had ceased to breathe. At the bottom was a room no bigger than a crypt. Stone walls, arched ceiling, and in the center, upon a pedestal carved with ancient script, a single candle. It burned, bright, unwavering, and I felt it before I understood it. This candle had never been extinguished. I approached slowly. The flame made no sound, but as I drew near, my scar began to burn, and then I saw theme marks on the wall, not carvings, names, written in ash, smeared in blood, etched with fingernails, hundreds, thousands, each name followed by a date. One name caught my eye, written alone in the center wall, larger than the others. Aliena 1492. Not absolved. Aliena, the name I had dared to think, the name I feared to say, the woman, the voice, the sinner heaven refused. As I stared, the flame of the candle pulsed once, twisted then flared white hot, and a gust of unseen wind slammed the door shut behind me. Darkness swallowed the room, all except the candle, unmoving, eternal, watching, and then came the whisper, not from the candle, not from the walls, from inside me. Elian. She always said my name like it belonged to her, like she had known it before I was born. You found the flame that holds the gate. It has burned since the day I spoke the first sin. It will burn until the last gate falls. I backed away. My voice cracked. What sin? What gate? Her voice grew sharper, not angry, wounded. The sin of loving what heaven could not name. The gate between silence and truth. And you, Father, are standing on its threshold. The candle surged again, and on the wall, beneath her name, a new name appeared in fresh ash. Elian 2025. Unjudged, my knees buckled, because I understood the implication. I was no longer the confessor. I was part of the confession. Episode 8. The voice that made a saint cry. It happened during morning mass. Full congregation, hymns echoing, the sun filtering through the stained glass, painting the pews in innocent colors. And yet beneath it all, I felt her, not physically, not even spiritually, more like an echo in the fabric of reality. Tightening, I stood at the pulpit, reading from Luke. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see. I stopped. The microphone cracked, and in the moment of silence that followed, her voice came through, not through my mouth, not through the speakers, but into the ears of every person in the room. Tell them, she said, soft, patient, dreadful, tell them what heaven did to me. I frowned, see, and that's when I saw him, a boy, maybe 12 years old, sitting in the third row. He was staring straight ahead, unblinking, pale, tears streaming down his face, though a hand moved. Then a woman in the front, an old widow, clutched her chest and gasped. The crucifix around her neck split into and fell to the ground. They shifted, and one by one, people began to weep. No sound, just tears. Even Father Moros, who hadn't cried in 30 years, stood up and walked toward the statue of Saint Cecilia at the side of the altar. He collapsed to his knees, and I watched powerless as the eyes of the statue began to weep blood. The congregation didn't scream. They didn't run. They just cried, as if something inside them had been touched, broken, or remembered. After the mass, if you can still call it, thought he checked the security recording. No sound, no voice captured, but the timestamp revealed something impossible. The audio cut out for exactly 3 minutes and 33 seconds. And when it returned, every candle in the church was already lit, even the ones we hadn't used in years. They burned in a straight line toward the altar. And then, a final horror. I replayed the footage of Father Moros kneeling before the statue, frame by frame, at exactly 1:11 into the silent window. He looked up, straight into the camera, and whispered, "She's not a demon, she's a memory God tried to erase." The screen flickered, and the statue's mouth moved. Saint Cecilia, the patron saint of music, smiled. Episode 9. The Mirror That Shows Heaven's Fire. They told me not to go into the reliquary alone. Too many rumors, too many priests who went in and came out different. But I wasn't looking for relics that morning. I was looking for a reflection, because for the last 3 nights, I'd seen it in my dreams. A mirror buried beneath the chapel's oldest stones, framed in thorns and whispering with light. A mirror that didn't show the world as it was, but as heaven sees it. I found it behind a false wall in the reliquary's lowest chamber, dust-covered, shrouded in a black cloth, unlabeled, unblessed. It looked ordinary at first. Old wood, cracked glass, no shine, no shimmer. But when I pulled the cloth away, the room changed. Light bent, silence deepened. My breath caught in my throat as I stared into the glass and saw not myself, but flames, a sky of fire, a gate in the clouds, reading gold, torn open like a wound in eternity, and falling from it, winds, blackened, broken, still smoking. I stepped back, heart thundering, but the mirror's surface didn't return to normal. It followed me wherever I moved. It didn't show my reflection, only the burning gate, growing larger, closer. Then, in the corner of the mirror, her face, Eliana, not shadowed, not veiled, clear now, eyes glowing like smoldering stars, tears of flame tracing down her cheeks. This is what they covered, she whispered from within the glass. The true gate was never meant to be closed, only hidden, and now you've seen it, Elian. You are part of its unlocking. The glass cracked, not shattered, cracked with intent. A single fracture ran from corner to corner, forming the symbol I'd seen scorched into the altar, the gate. And as the crack spread, the air in the room turned hot, unbearably hot. I could feel it in my lungs, my sin, as though the fire in the vision had breached the mirror's veil. I covered it again, threw the cloth over the frame, backed away, praying instinctively under my breath. But I heard her one last time, muffled but sharp. Mirrors don't lie, Father, not when they reflect what heaven fears most, its own guilt. Episode 10. The prayer that broke the sky. It was the kind of silence that feels like judgment, the kind that falls after something holy is broken, or before something unspeakable begins. That morning, I stood before the congregation, lips parted, heart hammering, words stuck in the back of my throat, like a sin refusing to be confessed. I couldn't preach, not after what I saw in the mirror, not after her voice whispered, "Heaven reflects its guilt." So instead, I prayed, not from the Bible, not from memory, from somewhere deeper, somewhere I didn't know existed in me. Oh Lord, if you still hear us, if your silence is not a punishment but a pause, let the gates open not to burn, but to cleanse. The moment the last word left my mouth, the light inside the chapel shifted, windows rattled, candles flared, bending toward the ceiling as though pulled by something above. And, the sound, like thunder, but sharper, like an ancient choir cracking in half. The sky roared, people screamed, some dropped to their knees, others covered their ears, but all of us, every soul in that building looked up. Through the stained glass dome, clouds were spiraling like a divine cyclone, right above the church. No lightning, just light, so bright it turned white, moon, red, then black. I stepped outside, trembling, the prayer still echoing in my bones. And then I saw it, a crack, not in the sky, in reality, like someone had drawn a jagged line straight through the firmament. Behind it, nothingness, and behind that, flame, not earthly, not hellish, something older, the kind of fire that knows your name before you speak it. And from the crack, a voice low, layered, and sorrowful breathed into my ear. One prayer, one true prayer, come unto what angels died to silence. A baby in the crowd began to wail. A statue of the Virgin Mary tilted on its own. And above us, the sky began to seal itself again, but not before something slipped through. A feather, scorched, heavy, falling like a message no one wanted to read. I caught it, it burned my palm, and written along the spine in curling black letters was a sentence no theology had ever prepared me for. Not all prayers are meant to be heard. Episode 11. The exorcist who refused. They said he was the best, Father Elian, the kind of man the Vatican sent when even the silence started to bleed. He'd exorcise children who spoke in ancient dialects, old women who floated, and once the according to rumor bishop who began vomiting pages of a Bible that didn't exist. So when I called him, I thought I was calling for help, but I didn't understand. You can't exorcise heaven. Here I've cloaked in black, rosary like iron around his wrist, eyes like dried bone, the kind of eyes that had seen too much, and kept going. I led him through the chapel in silence. I didn't mention the gate, or the scar, or the name that burned in ash beneath the candle, but as soon as we stepped inside the sanctuary, he stopped cold. He looked up at the crucifix and winced, like the air itself scratched his skin. Then he turned to me. "No demons here," he said. His voice was low, cracked. "You didn't call me for that." I don't know what I called you for," I admitted. He stared past me, toward the altar, toward the stained glass window behind it, and then, in the quietest voice I've ever heard from a man of God, he whispered, "You called me to witness what no priest should witness." He walked slowly to the altar, kneeling. Then he pulled something from his coat, a small silver mirror, shaped like a cross. He held it toward the pulpit. For a moment, nothing happened, just flickering candlelight. But then the mirror shattered in his hand. He gasped, blood dripping from between his fingers, and in the shards on the floor, I saw it, the gate, burning, open. A woman stood before it, Eliana, eyes closed, palms turned upward, as if offering herself to something we were never meant to see. Father Elian stumbled back, his voice shaking for the first time. He clutched the bleeding cross and said, "This isn't demonic. This is divine, twisted. This is what happens when heaven sins and refuses to repent." He turned to me. "You must burn the church. Tonight. Everything. Because what she's bringing, what you've invited, is not possession, it's reclamation." I stepped back. "You're saying she's..." He cut me off. "No, I'm saying he is afraid of her." He dropped the ruined cross at my feet and left. He didn't look back, didn't take his payment, didn't even bless the door. And I realized something I hadn't dared to admit. This wasn't about exorcising evil. It was about cleansing heaven's guilt. And I was too late to stop it. Episode 12, The Gatekeeper's Punishment. There are dreams you wake up from, and there are dreams that wake you up. This one was the second kind. I didn't fall asleep. That night I was pulled, dragged into something deeper than sleep, darker than fear. And when I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my bed. I was standing in front of the gate. Not a vision, not a symbol. The real thing. It towered before me, carved into ash and bone, pulsing with light like it had a heartbeat. It wasn't open, not yet, but it was breathing, and something behind it was weeping. A voice echoed across the space, broken. "Oh, they burned my name, so I burned my wings." I turned and saw him, the gatekeeper, an angel, once, but not anymore. His wings were skeletal, ribbons of blackened feather barely clinging to him, chains wrapped around his ankles and throat. One eye was a flickering star, the other gone. He knelt before the gate like a prisoner guarding his own sentence. "They told me to hold the door shut," he said, "but they never told me why." He looked at me with hate, but sorrow. And then she came, the woman who remembered what even God tried to forget. "Eliana," I whispered. The gatekeeper flinched, as if the name still burned. "You think she's a curse," he said, "but she's the only truth left unburied." He reached toward me with a trembling hand, pressed something cold into my palm, a key, forged of glass and ash, etched with 3 letters that shimmered like living ink. "EVE." The first sin was never the fruit, he said. It was the silence, the refusal to confess. Behind the gate, something stirred, a light, a cry, a sound that wasn't sound, more like the memory of creation itself, trying to claw its way back in. "She wants you to speak it," the gatekeeper said. "The truth, the whole truth, not the truth written in ink, but the one written in blood." His voice broke. A single feather dropped from his ruined wing and ignited before it hit the ground. "I held this gate for eons, but it is not mine to keep anymore." The chains around his body tightened by force, but by fate. And the last thing he said, before he was dragged backward into the fire, was whispered not in words, but into my soul. "Heaven doesn't fear sin. It fears the ones who remember what it tried to bury." I awoke gasping. The key was still in my hand, and on my floor, traced in soot, was a message. The gate opens with confession. Yours. Episode 13, The Confession of God. I always believed that confession was for the sinner, that the one who kneels is the one who's broken. But what happens when the one who confesses is God? It was just after 3 a.m. I was alone in the chapel, holding the key Elian had placed in my dreams. Eve, it read, not as a name, but as an origin. I approached the confessional again. Slowly, the same wooden booth where voice had first ruptured my life. I Saturday inside, not as a priest, but as someone ready to listen. I didn't speak, didn't pray, and yet, the other side of the curtain moved. Creaked. 10. A breath, followed by a voice so ancient, it sounded like it echoed from the marrow of time itself. Not hers, not Elian's, his. Bless me, Father, for I have hidden too long. My hands began to tremble, my throat clenched. It wasn't a vision, it wasn't a demon. It was a voice layered in galaxies, woven with light and shadow, pain and majesty. I'm a man in my image. It continued, but not all images are pure. She was the mirror I shattered, because I saw myself. I wanted to speak. I couldn't. My lips were frowning in reverencial terror. She loved what I could not name. He said, she bore what I could not allow. And when she bled truth into the garden, I did not comfort her. I silenced her. There was a sound like weeping, but not from him. From within the booth, the wood itself seemed to ache. I sent angels to guard the gate. The voice whispered, not to protect heaven, but to keep the wound closed. Suddenly, the curtain between us burned quietly, kindly, to ash, and the space across from me was still empty. But the presence was there. It filled the booth. It filled me. She is not vengeance. He said, she is memory. And what you have heard is my confession. The walls groaned. Above me, the crucifix cracked. Just once, a hairline fracture between Christ's ribs, and then silence. Total, complete. I was alone again, but not really, because now I knew this entire unraveling, this fire, this voiceless gate, wasn't just a rebellion. It was his guilt. And I, Father Elian, wasn't just a witness. I was the keeper of God's most shameful secret. Episode 14, The Heaven That Burned for Love. They told us heaven is untouchable, perfect, a kingdom of light, unmarred by the weight of human sin. But they never told us what happens when heaven itself is the one who sins. It began with a heat wave that wasn't in the forecast. The sky above the church gray one moment, then gold the next, but not the gold of sunrise, the gold of something bleeding light. The parishioners had gathered for evening mass, but they didn't make it through the second hymn. One by one, they started to fall silent and look up. The clouds were parting now, cracking like porcelain under pressure, and through them came embers, as low falling, soft at first, then glowing white hot. A girl screamed. An old man began to chant in Latin, as if trying to hold the sky together with syllables. But I already knew it wasn't an invasion, it was a surrender. Because heaven wasn't descending in judgment, it was collapsing in grief. And in the center of it all, descending like a single tear from eternity, was her, Eliana. But this time, she wore no veil. She wasn't shadowed or spectral. She glowed. Her feet hovered just above the altar, her arms outstretched, palms open, as if inviting the sky to finally tell the truth. The flames did not burn her, they burned for her. And I understood. She wasn't the fallen. She was the one who remained faithful to love that heaven called forbidden, to a child conceived not in sin, but in something older than doctrine. Truth. The statues began to melt. The stained glass windows cried liquid color. The tabernacle shook. And then, behind her, the gate appeared, fully formed, wreathed in fire, pulsing like a living thing. She turned to me. Her eyes weren't angry. They were tired. Heaven burned. She whispered, not because I defied it, but because it couldn't admit it loved me back. A wind-like breath swept through the church. Candles went out. Time slowed. 10. The gate opened, but nothing came through, because this wasn't about unleashing torment. This was about revealing silence. Behind the gate was not hell, not paradise, but a place where unspoken love had been kept in chains. She stepped through it and turned back just once. I never wanted vengeance, Elian, only acknowledgement. Now it's your turn. Speak what the sky won't. And then, she vanished. The fire didn't spread. It dimmed. The church didn't collapse. It exhaled. Heaven didn't scream. It wept. Episode 15. The last sin before heaven falls silent. I didn't sleep that night. Not after the gate opened. Not after she walked through. The world hadn't ended. No apocalypse. No judgment raining from above. Just quiet, but not the peaceful kind. The kind of silence that follows truth too loud to be denied. And now it was my turn. The pews were empty, the candles unlit, the altar scarred with ash and memory. I sat her in the same confessional where this all began, where she first whispered sin into sacred space. Only this time, I was the one confessing. There was no priest on the other side, no ear to receive my voice, just God, and whatever was left of him in this place. I closed my eyes and spoke the words no priest should ever say. Forgive me, Father, for I have believed much. I believed your silence was holy, that your absence was mercy, that your refusal to answer was proof of your purity. But now I know you hid, not from sin, but from what you did to her. I felt the weight in the air shift. The walls didn't tremble, the sky didn't open, but something unseen listened. You loved her, I continued, and when you couldn't explain it, you rewrote the story. You called her temptation, you cast her into myth. You told the world she was a warning, when really, she was the truth you feared. The mirror across from the booth began to fog, not from breath, from grief. I stood, walked to the altar. The air was thick, holy, but no longer untouchable. I lit a single candle, the one that had never died, and placed it beneath the crucifix. Then I opened the forbidden gospel, the one bound in ash and confession, and I read aloud the final verse, in a voice no longer afraid. Let heaven be judged by its own silence. Let the gate remain open, not for wrath, but for remembrance. For the last sin is forgetting. Outside, the wind didn't howl. It paused. A single feather drifted through the broken window above the altar. It landed at my feet, poor white, untouched by fire. Not hers, not his, mine. I looked to the heavens one final time, and this time, they did not look away, because it wasn't the flame that set heaven on fire. It was the confession no one dared to speak until now.